Welcome to the Real View podcast, where Ohio Realtors connect you to innovators and influencers, keeping you with the real view of real estate. Whether you're a broker, agent, first-time homebuyer, industry leader, or just happen to stumble upon our podcast today, you can expect to hear tips, tools, tricks, interesting information, and so much more from the experts in Ohio's real estate game.
Welcome to the Ohio Realtors Real View podcast. My name is Michael Edwards, and I am the manager of Ohio's Realtor Party and Community Engagement with Ohio Realtors, and I'm your host today for this podcast episode. Many of you know that the Ohio Realtors Convention is approaching from September 15th through the 17th in Cleveland this year. Along with convention, we have the RPAC Impact Awards on Tuesday, September 16th, where we celebrate our committed investors and the advocacy that has taken place for real estate locally, statewide, and nationally. Every year, we request a keynote speaker for our ceremony, and today we have a very special guest speaker on the podcast, Donna Brazile. Welcome, Donna.
Hello, it's good to see you, and I'm looking forward to returning to the Buckeye State. The city of Cleveland is also near and dear to my heart, but in fifth grade, I won a contest, and I was Miss Ohio for my entire fifth year in elementary school. So every time I come back to the state of Ohio, I think about all of those days sitting in Mr. Lee and Mr. Marchand classes.
Well, the Buckeye State can't wait to have you back, Donna.
Thank you.
So Donna, among many things, is a veteran political strategist, New York Times bestselling author, senior advisor at Purple Strategies, former chair of the J. William Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board, and sought-after Emmy and Peabody award-winning media contributor to such outlets as ABC News, USA Today, The Hill, and theGrio. First, Donna, may you please tell us about yourself? Where are you from? Where did you attend school?
Well, I am a proud Louisianian. I came up in an era where my parents and many in my community sought to celebrate all of the wonderful change that was occurring during that period of time. The passage of the Civil Rights Act, the passage of the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act. So there was no question that change was in the air. I grew up right outside the city of New Orleans. I was born in the city, but my parents raised their 9 children out in Kenner, Louisiana, which is home to John Baptiste and so many other great musicians. So I spent most of my formative years attending public schools in the Kenner and Metairie area, down there close to the bayou. And I went to college at Louisiana State University. It was a great time to be alive, to be an American. I'll never forget the summer of 1976 when I got deeply involved in the campaign to elect Jimmy Carter and Walter Mondale. It wasn't my first dip in the political waters, but it was one that had a lasting impact. So I am still actively engaged in my community here in Washington, D.C., where I've been a resident now for almost 43 years. And I am also a part-time college professor at Georgetown University here in the District of Columbia. And I look forward to seeing my students in just a few weeks.
It's wonderful, Donna, and I'm sure Louisiana is proud to claim you as a native. So your resume is impressive, Donna. Can you go a little bit into how you began in your career and why do you do what you do?
Well, before I went to college, I knew I had this talent for talking. Yeah, I was such a talker. Long before there were pundits, I was a talker. And so my mother would always say, shut up, Donna. But I love the news. I love reading newspapers. But when I learned that, of course, there was a city council candidate in my community that had promised to build a playground, I got engaged in that campaign. Now, I was too young to vote, but I was old enough to understand the difference between having a playground in our community and not having the ability to develop one's skills in athletics. I was an athlete. Well, let's just say I was a tomboy. If the boys could play it, I could play it too. I love baseball, basketball, softball. I played volleyball. And of course, I even threw the shot put. So that candidate who promised to build a playground needed people in my community, the adults, to register and vote. So I volunteered to go door to door, asking all of my friends, hey, Pam, is Miss Rita registered? Hey, Baby Jack, Miss Hermon registered? Lois Jean, is she registered? Is Reverend Joe registered? So by the end of that summer, in the beautiful year of 1969, we were able to register over 300 voters. The candidate won, and the playground set was built. And by 1971, I was a little assistant coach for a girls softball team, 7, 8, and 9. I was 11 by then. And I just kept getting more and more involved in community activities, the bookmobile club. I got involved in all kinds of what I call just fun and amazing things because I knew I wanted a future in public service. I didn't know how long it would take, but I knew I wanted a future. So by 16, I was a youth camp coordinator for Jefferson Parish, which is where we were being raised. And by the time I went to LSU, I was well on my way of being a political activist and someone who cared about building community so that every citizen could engage in the political process.
That is wonderful, Donna. Thank you for sharing. And actually, that does make a great segue into my next question. Many of our realtors are politically active and advocates of the real estate community. My question is, what does advocacy mean to you?
It means using your voice to engage in the political process, to advocate on behalf of citizens, advocate on behalf of realtors, advocate on behalf of educators, to put the issues before the people so that people understand what's at stake, whether it's fair housing, if you're a realtor looking for, more infrastructure so that you can continue to build decent and affordable housing. If you're a realtor, you want to be engaged with lawmakers, not only at the local level, because you need to ensure you're in compliance with the local laws, environmental laws, whatever building codes. You want to also be engaged at the state level because you want to have an impact at the gubernatorial and state legislative level, where they, of course, set laws and policies for the state, and clearly at the national level with 2 United States senators and, of course, all of your great members of Congress. I think it's important that every citizen stay engaged, whether you're a realtor, whether you're an educator. It's important that we all participate. We have a representative government, which means the people govern. In order for our democracy to function and flourish, we need people to be more engaged in the process, not just as partisans, but as citizens of our great democracy.
That was fantastic, Donna. Thank you for going into that. You are talented in advocacy, among other fields. I am curious, which accolade of yours means the most to you?
Well, starting at such an early age, at the age of 9, and now I'm in my mid 60s, I've always enjoyed, meeting new people. I enjoyed being a teacher. I have not only been a part-time professor for 33 years, University of Maryland, College Park. I served 1 year as the Winona Lippman Scholar at Rutgers University. I've served 4 years as the Gwendolyn Colbert King Chair in Public Policy. I've been to the Harvard Institute of Politics, the Harvard Shorenstein School for Media and Public Policy, but Georgetown for the last 23 years. I think I enjoy telling people I am a teacher. At my core, I'm a teacher. I love students. I love bringing them into the political process. I enjoy helping them find jobs and internships, whether on Capitol Hill or back in state houses across the country. And many of my students go on to work in academia, work in the media, or even some of them have decided to run for political office. I count among the United States Senate. I got 2 senators that I work directly with. I was their mentor. And then, of course, all throughout the House of Representatives. They're my children, my babies, and the future of American democracy. So I'm most proud of the work I've done in politics, but more importantly, in academia.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Donna. You mentioned American democracy. and part of that is home ownership. So my question is home ownership important to you, and why or why not?
It is very important. First of all, I'll never forget my first house. I bought my first house at the age of 32. It took me 10 years to save up over $10,000. I was a renter on Capitol Hill, 3rd and Constitution Avenue. And, for years and years, I kept putting aside money, $150, $200, whatever I could afford. And I kept my eye on a certain neighborhood, Capitol Hill, which I love. It was close to the United States Capitol. And it was such a historical place. And so I kept saying, okay, I have to hurry up. I have to hurry up. I got to find a house. And I knew I could only afford to buy a house under $200,000 at that time. So I bought my first house in the winter of 1991. I went to closing during the summer months, moved in, and I lived at that property for 30 years. For 30 years, I lived on Capitol Hill, 8 blocks from the United States Capitol. I could go all the way upstairs to my roof. And during the 4th of July celebration, I could see the fireworks and so forth. But home ownership is about building equity. It's about, creating community. I love my community. I love the fact that the value of my first house within 5 years jumped by, close to 12%. And by the time I sold my house, I paid under $200,000, and the equity in my house at that time was well over $800,000, which gave me the opportunity to buy the house that I'm living in right now here in another historic part of Washington, D.C. So, home ownership is like, having wealth, and thanks to the American dream and access to the American dream, which I believe home ownership is part of that American dream. That's why we want the American dream to stay alive, and so that people can be able to purchase their own homes. I was able to help my nieces and nephews after they finished their formal education to put down a couple $1,000s so they can get their first home or condo. And, over the years, I've been able to save additional money. And now I have a home not only here in a historic part of Washington, D.C., 3.3 miles north of the White House, but also have a condo down in my beloved hometown of New Orleans on Chapatula Street, which, if the historians are correct, that is where my ancestors was brought into this country, and they were sold into slavery. So I have a piece of the real estate where my family came into the United States as slaves. Now, a descendant of those slaves is now a homeowner in that same part of my historic city.
A fantastic story, Donna. And I and many of our members are proud of you for your home ownership and the wealth you've accumulated.
And let me just tell you, I know this sounds strange, but the realtors in my life, I'm still engaged with them. Once I bought my first home, I told everybody about my realtor. He worked with me. He helped me to, get all my paperwork done, to get my information and my loan request. And I'm still in touch with my realtor. I'm in touch with the realtor down in New Orleans. Whenever anybody in my family, once they've saved their money and ready to move or ready to purchase, I call my realtor. I said, Miss Jamila, I got another one for you. So I love my realtors, not just here in Washington, D.C., but my realtors back home. I have been able over the course of my career to speak to the realtors in California, the National Association of Realtors. They had their annual meeting several years ago. In Baltimore, I've spoken to the realtors down in Florida. So I'm looking forward to meeting my friends in the real estate community in the great Buckeye State.
We are very much looking forward to having you. You did mention the American dream, Donna. I'm curious, what do you think the American dream is?
The American dream is who we are. If you work hard, play by the rules, get a good education, you should be able to afford to own your own house. This is part of my American dream, to be a homeowner, to have a home in this historic nation's capital, to be able to invite my friends and my neighbors. I love sitting on my porch. being an American and knowing and savoring that American dream. It is part of who we are. It's part of the American story. It's why so many immigrants would like to live in the United States. Everybody wants a piece of that dream to call their own. And I think it's important that all of us understand how valuable it is to have a home, to have a roof over your head, to be able to accrue equity through this process. It's important that we all have a piece of the American dream.
I love that, Donna. Thank you. Thank you for going into that. One of the many reasons we ask our keynote speaker to do a podcast is so our membership can receive a preview on what you plan to talk about. May I ask you, what do you intend to talk about at Ohio Realtors Convention this year?
I'm going to talk about community. As you know, we're on the midst of the United States of America will be celebrating its 250th birthday next 4th of July. And, everyone talks about politics, but when they talk about politics, they typically hold their nose. I want to talk about building community over the next, several months. So as we prepare to celebrate America's 250th birthday, how do we become patriots? How do we become better citizens? How do we continue this experiment, this experiment of being Americans? And how do we pass the torch on to our children and future generations? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'll mix in some stuff about Washington, what's going on in D.C. Look, we don't have to like what's happening today in our politics, but we need to understand the political culture because it's the culture we've created. And we need to know, like many of us from in New Orleans, how to make a better roux, how to stir in the Trinity, and how to add those special ingredients so that 250 years from next year, the world will continue to see America as that bright, shining light on the hill.
It's a very optimistic and future-forward way of thinking of things, Donna. Thank you for going into that. And talking about optimism, are you optimistic about politics in America in the years ahead?
I have to be, because I'm a creature of hope, of faith. I wouldn't return to teaching if I didn't feel that the future will be better than it is today. That while we look back at the past, it may not have been everything we wanted, but today, the present, we have an opportunity to create a better future, a better foundation for our children, and a better landscape for those who will come. Every day that I get up, I pray for strength, I pray for good health, but I also pray for my neighbors and my friends. I pray for my country. I pray for my president. And because I'm Catholic, well, I pray for my Pope too. So I'm a creature of optimism. I'm a prisoner of hope. And I want to continue to try to be that little kid that my parents raised, to always walk with my head up high, to always be respectful, to believe every person should be treated with dignity and respect. And I those are the values that I hope I can also share with my friends and my colleagues in Ohio. We are the future. It's time that we begin to think of ourselves as passing that torch of freedom, the values that we share as Americans. We have to pass that on to others. We cannot, as Americans, step down. We got to continue to step up, not just for each other, but for the world. Now, look, I have differences with people. I'm a big fan of the New Orleans Saints, all right? So we're not going to agree during football season. But you do have Joe Burrows, and he comes from LSU. So clearly, Ohio has something to offer everybody, just like those of us from Louisiana, and of course, many of us who call the nation's capital our home as well.
You mentioned that, Donna, and those are great values you brought up. Thank you so much for going into that. You are a friend of Realtor and the Realtor Party, and the Realtor Party is also known as the Purple Party.
Oh,
I'm curious what you think about bipartisanship and its importance as we move forward.
well, it's funny when I see you all next month. 20 years ago, I had probably one of the most difficult periods of my life. I think many of us from the Gulf Coast, those of us who grew up on the bayou, we witnessed a horrific Category 5 hurricane that ripped through the Gulf Coast. Like many Americans in that area, my family, many of them had to evacuate. Some could not evacuate. Many survived, some did not. One of the things I learned 20 years ago is that there's no such thing as a Republican or a Democrat when it comes to a national emergency. I'm grateful that I was able to reach out to President Bush at the time and his staff to allow me to come in and make a case to help the people of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama who did not have a pathway back home, to help us rebuild our city, to help us rebuild the levees, to help us reopen the schools, to help us create a safer environment. And as a result of that, I met more friends when I decided to reach out than being on national TV, criticizing or demonizing, various public officials for not, being there immediately after the storm passed when the flood waters began to rage. So I learned years ago, and perhaps all my adult life, I've been able to cross the aisle. I am a registered Democrat, but I am an American first. I put my country first, like my father did when he served in the military, like my grandparents, my uncles. You put your country first. And yes, I'm a partisan. I have a preference, but that doesn't mean I vote Democratic 100%. I voted for Republicans in my lifetime, not lately, but I have in the past. And I'm willing to sit down with Republicans. I count as my friends several Republican governors. I know your governor. I know your former governor. And of course, I'm familiar with some of the people who want to be your future governor. We'll see. But the main thing is I try to keep an ounce of humility and a big pound of hope whenever I'm facing a crisis. And I'm grateful that George W. Bush allowed me to come over to the White House for 3 years to help with the restoration and the recovery of my great city. And, during the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, I was on Air Force One with President Obama going down to New Orleans to commemorate the 10th anniversary. And I was on the phone with George W. Bush staff. And I said, what time is the former president landing? They told me. I said, and where is he going? Warren Easton High School on Canal Street. I said, as soon as I finish this event with President Obama in the Ninth Ward, I'll be over to greet the former president and Mrs. Laura Bush at Warren Easton. So I think it's important that we work together. And I'm still in touch with former President Bush as well as former President Obama. That's the way it should be.
Donna, thank you for bringing up Katrina. That's a tragedy many of us remember. And it's a great example of the importance of reaching across the aisle. So thank you for bringing that up.
I had to also bring it up because many of our residents also landed in Ohio, and some of them are still there. I know I had a cousin that came up to Ohio, and he's deceased now, but his daughters are there. His wife is there. So thank you, Ohio. Thank you for taking in so many Katrina victims and residents and survivors, because there were survivors. Thank you, Ohio, and thank you to America for everything that you did to help us get back on our feet. We appreciate it.
Fantastic, Donna. Thank you. Finally, what would you like to say to realtors before the convention in September?
I think we're living in a period of uncertainty, and it's important to gather to find out the latest trends, to find out what's happening across the state, to see where we are in terms of inflation, if the Fed will reduce interest rates. This is a great time to gather and to strategize about the future. Tomorrow is going to be far different than the day, but we need to know everything that's happening, not just in our economy, but as I mentioned earlier, we need to know the policymakers, and we also need to prepare for the upcoming 2026 political cycle. That's a very important cycle. The midterms are always about checking in with one another and seeing if we should change course and go in a different direction. So I think this is a great opportunity because I also will be talking about the midterms and what's at stake and why this midterm might be different from all other midterms, because there's so much at stake, so many offices that will be open. Ohio is getting ready to go through another period, perhaps a redistricting. How will that impact realtors? So I think this is a great time to gather. And for me, it's a wonderful time right before Oktoberfest to make a visit to the great state of Ohio.
Well, thank you so much, Donna. We are very much looking forward to hosting you in the great state of Ohio. Thank you for a preview into what you plan to talk about during convention and for letting us get to know you a little bit more. We're very excited.
And I just got to decide if I'm going to wear Ohio State red or LSU purple. That's the only big decision I have to make.
I think either would be appropriate.
Well, I look forward to pulling out one of them from my upstairs room and packing it up and spending a great time with you all. I look forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Real View. That wraps up today's episode. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at ohiorealtors.org/therealview and on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Have questions, comments, or suggestions? We want to hear from you. Email us at podcast@ohiorealtors.org. We'll see you next time.